Donald Trump was once again in court today, and about the same time that he snuck onto Truth Central to compare himself to Jesus Christ, the presiding judge threatened to imprison him because naturally Trump violated his gag order. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, so Donald Trump is 77 years old, not exactly a spring chicken, and he has convinced himself that he's above the law, that he is beyond consequences. And to be fair to him, the rest of the world has actively aided and abetted that mentality, particularly the Republican Party, over the past 8 years. He's wealthy. He was once the president of the United States. He's an incredibly powerful person. And even now, even though he's facing 2 indictments from special counsel Jack Smith, the indictment from Fulton County, Georgia, the indictment in New York from Alvin Bragg, the other case in New York, and that's the setting of this particular trial, involving the dissolution of some of his businesses, a lot of that stuff was just so late to the game. I mean, he still thinks he's above the law. And so he went on Truth Central to retweet this image of himself in court sitting next to either Jesus Christ or Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm not exactly sure because he doesn't exactly clarify, but it seems to me probably Jesus. So he's leaning into the cult mentality and the strong evangelical base that his particular cult has. It's not the first time that Trump supporters and MAGA cultists have favorably compared Donald Trump to Jesus Christ. So again, he's just trying to evoke this air of persecution, that he's this persecuted Messiah, much like Christ himself. It's really sick and gross and super strange. But the plot thickens because about the same time that he went on Truth Central to retruth that, or whatever he calls it, he got hit with a near jail sentence by the presiding judge because Donald Trump has been under a gag order, I think, for like more than 2 weeks. Because when the last time he was in this particular court before the presiding judge, Judge Engoron, I was going to pronounce that wrong, he was like doing what Trump usually does, which is like tweeting out or truthing out or whatever, like saying all sorts of incendiary things about court officers and their family members. And in this particular case, he attacked Judge Engoron. Again, I'm going to struggle with that. His clerk. Chuck Schumer's girlfriend, Allison R. Greenfield, is running this case against me. How disgraceful. This case should be dismissed immediately. And in response, this prompted a gag order from the judge. He's like, listen, no, this isn't going to work. You're not going to threaten or intimidate or insult or make incendiary comments about court officers. And so he imposed a gag order on him. And Trump came back into court and said, listen, I took it down. I took down that truth. But then the Midas Touch found out that actually, no, he didn't delete the post. It's still up. And the judge is furious. Judge Arthur F. Engoron, striking a serious tone, began Friday at trial by laying out the high stakes and demanding that Trump's lawyers explain themselves. In the current overheated climate, incendiary comments can, and in some cases already has, led to serious physical harm and worse. I will now allow the defendants to explain why this blatant violation of the gag order would not result in serious sanctions, including financial sanctions and or possibly imprisoning him. Christopher Kise immediately apologized for Trump's behavior, blaming the 2024 Republican presidential candidate's bloated campaign machinery for simply forgetting to remove a webpage that mirrored the Truth Social post Trump had already deleted. There was no intention to evade or circumvent or ignore the order, I assure you that. I just know that this is a very large machine, and this is one of the reasons, frankly, I don't have social media, he said, trying to deflect with humor. But that's been taken down, and we don't have any other. There were no subsequent postings. The judge did not immediately accept that excuse. I will take it under advisement, but Donald Trump is still responsible for the large machine. Yeah, so, I mean, the fact that Judge Chutkan, in the second special counsel investigation about Trump's involvement with January 6th and his attempt to steal the 2020 election from President Biden. The fact that she also imposed a narrowly tailored gag order on him and threatened sanctions, and then you have this from the judge, it seems like Donald Trump is really, truly, slowly pushing his luck. Now, what I would argue is that if Donald Trump were any other person, and perhaps even any other former politician, maybe, I think, again, as I've said before in a previous video, the only exception to this might be President Biden, and that's just because he's the sitting president. Donald Trump is still, even now, being treated with kid gloves. But it seems like the judges in question are really running out of patience. The last thing I want to point out, though, pertaining to this, because again, there are three parts to it. Trump comparing himself to Jesus in terms of persecution, Trump being threatened with jail time openly, not even hinted at, just flat out said, listen, you need to explain yourselves why I shouldn't put this man in jail. But then the third component is this attitude right here as embodied in this tweet by Joe Walsh, not from the Eagles, you music buffs may know, but another Joe Walsh, who used to be a Republican congressman. Now he's become an ever-Trumper. He's kind of like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. So this is in response to Judge Engoron's remarks. Joe Walsh says, imprison him for violating a gag order and he'll be the next president. Guaranteed. Stop putting gag orders on him. I don't want to spend too much time on this except to say I struggle because, listen, I understand a utilitarian argument to be made that, you could, by applying the letter of the law, create an even worse outcome down the road. And we certainly don't want Donald Trump to be president. If I have to choose between imprisoning Donald Trump for a gag order and making sure that he's not president of the United States, of course, I would prefer that he not be president of the United States than him simply being jailed for a gag order, if those things are mutually exclusive, which is what Joe Walsh is saying. Joe Walsh is saying, listen, you pick one. You either, because if you do impose a jail sentence for the violation of the gag order, you will effectively guarantee that he wins the election. That's his argument. The problem for me is this. Even though I'm sympathetic, I understand the argument. Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw? That's the thing. Because Republicans and centrists continue, and feckless liberals, they keep saying that. Well, if you hold Trump accountable, there have been people who've made that argument for everything. Vivek Ramaswamy and others say that, basically, if you do this, it's divisive, it's divisive. That argument has been used every which way. If you prosecute Trump at all, you're guaranteeing that he'll win the presidency. If you indict him at all, it's just going to rile up his base. It's going to make him mad. They're going to vote for him anyway. If you convict him, same thing. If you make him take a mugshot, he'll just, fundraise off it. There have also been those arguments for potential 14th Amendment challenges to Trump's candidacy, as we've discussed in previous videos. The idea that because he's an insurrectionist, or at the very least factually gave aid and comfort to insurrectionists when he was president on January 6th, the argument goes, well, listen, even if you have a valid legal case to make against Trump, utilitarian logic would dictate that you don't do that because you're probably going to cause civil war. Again, sympathetic to these arguments, and I'm not saying that I'm not persuadable to them, but I think you have to make a really strong case, and you also have to identify with me where the line is. Because this idea that it's just like classic abuse logic, isn't it? It's like if you are being abused and you strike back, you defend yourself against your abuser, well, you will escalate things, right? That's the logic. And that's gross, right? We would never accept that in that context, that we would never advise someone who's being abused not to defend themselves against their abuser, because if they do, it might infuriate their abuser more, and there could be even greater physical consequence. That's the thing that bothers me so much about this. It's so unsatisfying. Even if the argument can be made, I don't think he's made a persuasive case here. And also, what does it say about the modern Republican Party that they're so contrarian and so spitefully motivated to defend Trump against all things, that the idea is, listen, if you hold him accountable, if you hold our guy accountable, you're just going to make me mad and make me back him anyway. It's so weird. Donald Trump was right. The one time I think that we can say Donald Trump was right about anything is when he said, I think it was 2015 or 2016, that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight and not lose a single vote. I don't know. This, like I said, there's so much wrapped into this. The cultishness of the Christian iconography, trying to compare himself to a persecuted Messiah. The fact that a judge rightly threatened to jail him and probably would have jailed him if he were anybody else. And then the third thing is this idea that we can't hold Trump accountable or defend ourselves against him using the justice system, prosecuting him for his crimes and corruption, because if you do, all that's going to do is infuriate his cultists, and he may become president again. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you find the argument persuasive. If you don't find the argument persuasive, are there any circumstances under which you'd find that argument persuasive? I'd love to hear back from you. But as far as I'm concerned, even though I understand what Joe Walsh is getting at, I just categorically reject it. I don't think he's made a compelling case, and I think that he would need to identify for me where's the line. If a gag order you don't think is sufficient, like, okay, it's relatively petty in the grand scheme of things, fine, but where do you draw the line, Joe Walsh and other Joe Walshes out there? Where is it that no matter what the risk is of potentially motivating Trump's base to come out and vote for him, that we should pursue justice anyway? Where is that line for you? So again, let me know what you think in the comments.